Hi there, wonderful people. It's Marc Laurenson here from Sydney Astrology School. And thanks for joining me as we continue swimming through the houses with Neptune. And in this episode, it's episode number 8, we're going to be looking at Neptune in the first house. So when we're thinking about the first house is the house that actually establishes us. It establishes us as single entities in our own right. And it is about this little package that we come in. And this little package is physical and it's given a name. It's given a name like Michelle or Stephen or Mark or Julia. And this package now understands itself and identifies as an entity that is single and a feeling of being able to function well, as a human in this world and be able to get out into the world and enact itself and get what it wants. And so when we understand the sort of the primary physicality of what that's all about, and the drive that's part of the first house as well, we tend to think it's very, very different to Neptune, don't we? Neptune is very connected to all of life itself. Neptune has no boundary as such. And so when you've got Neptune in the first house, we're looking at somebody who is needing to enact Neptune in physical form, so to speak. So this is going to be an interesting one because with the understanding of Neptune being connected to everything and everyone, there might be a sense of these people not knowing where they end and where the world starts. It feels like these people might feel like they're morphing into the world as they get out and be able to connect or express themselves in some kind of way. Now, this can make them hypersensitive to life. They may feel quite deeply because vibrationally, as I said, they're connected to what's going on around them. So I want to say they're probably very, very sensitive to the nuances in life and the subtleties in life. Vibrationally, they probably are linked to what's going on, outside of the physical world. Maybe on some level, some people might say, oh, they could be quite psychic, or they're open to signs, or they know what people are thinking. I want to say there's a heightened level of compassion involved with these people. Now, I'm not saying every single person who's got Neptune in the first house is like this, because I know a lot of people with Neptune in the first house that can sometimes go in the opposite direction to this. But I'm just saying this is the more classic and slightly higher version of Neptune in the first house. It's a feeling of many people might say an empathic kind of feeling. Some people may be empaths with Neptune in the first house, that deep feeling of what somebody else is going through, which on some level is beautiful if you can do something with that in a healing kind of way. And many people with Neptune in the first house can be great healers. But on another level, it can be quite overwhelming for people with Neptune in the first house. It can be all too much for them. That feeling of being connected to everything, the good stuff and the not so good stuff. And it can be quite overwhelming for the Neptune in the first house people. And so I don't want to go down the road of the classic addictive stuff with Neptune, but I want to say that Neptune in the first house people might have to be extra cautious in that area too. The escapist mechanism of not of feeling too overly connected to everything in life might actually feel like they're kind of drowning in it in a way. And so I want to say be careful of any areas where escape might be an option for people with Neptune in the first house. Neptune in the first house people can often be very creative and very, very artistic. This is something I've noticed a lot with Neptune in the first house, people. Um, Another thing with Neptune in the first house, as I said before, is a kind of like a healing nature that comes through, a nature that really does want to get down and be of some kind of soulful help to somebody else. That's another big Neptune in the first house thing. Neptune in the first house people do have to be very careful, though. They really, really do. And if you do have Neptune in the first house, I hope you're listening to this. You can open up far too wide. You know how Neptune doesn't have the boundary? And so it can sometimes be like a beach without a shark net. You know what I mean? It can open up far too wide to everything and everyone. And whatever comes in, comes in. And so these people tend to, I want to say, have to be careful of people taking advantage of them or using them. Sometimes people with Neptune in the first house are like chameleons. They kind of morph into or melt into the people that are around them. They find it very challenging to establish a strong identity of their own. So they actually just become what's in the, in the vibrational vicinity. And often, sometimes they can be easily led, that kind of thing. That's another thing they have to be very, very careful of. Um, with Neptune in the first house, I always think that there is something going on where the physical part of who we are, the human part of who we are, and the real part of who we are, the soul part of who we are trying to merge in some kind of way. And so for us, I want to say that people with Neptune in the first house, I want to say that there has to be a part of us that's connected to our intuition or our inner voice or our inner guidance or our angels or whatever you want to call it in some kind of way that guides us through life, that helps us through life. And that's how we enact. That's how we get out and become the people that we want to become. We're kind of guided by an inner knowing. And there's a sense of having a deep, deep faith in that that becomes super, super important for Neptune in the first house people. The rescuer syndrome is big with Neptune in the first house. Sacrificing and being the martyr, another thing that Neptune in the first house people have to be very, very careful of. Um, as I said before, their hypersensitivity to life can actually go in the opposite direction. And sometimes things can become all too much for Neptune in the first house people to the point where they can cut off in some kind of way. It's almost like they can numb themselves to things or numb themselves to life, which isn't a good thing at all. It feels a lot of the time it feels like this is a protective mechanism of sorts, or a mechanism that's going to kind of keep their sense of humanness or their sense of their identity intact in some kind of way. But what it's actually doing is it's actually cutting off a big, big part of their Neptunian nature that is actually trying to work for them. So they've kind of pulled the plug out. They've kind of disengaged from that. And so what they tend to do is they just tend to kind of, robot through life. They kind of are emotionally or disconnected from life totally, that they don't feel anything anymore. And that's another thing that Neptune in the first house people have to be very, very careful of. Now, I want to say with Neptune in the first house, possibly, I've heard people talk about this. Certain astrologers have mentioned that possibly their feeling of being connected to oneness and the wholeness and the heaven, so to speak, would have been a big, big part of them coming in and being born. And maybe they didn't kind of want to be born. There might have been a bit of a push me pull you going on. between the two worlds as they were coming in. So maybe coming into a body and getting into the physical world and dealing with life on that level could sometimes possibly feel a little bit like, why did I come here in the first place? Why did I leave the beauty and the love and the connection of where I truly live, my home? And so there might be a little bit of that kind of inner yearning for something. Um, I want to say with people with Neptune in the first house, that meditation and long walks in nature and going down by the waterfront and quiet time and alone time, all those things are going to be super, super important. People are going to be thinking, oh, Mark, aren't you sounding a little bit 12th housey? Well, maybe to a certain degree, but I honestly believe that the the initiating and the drive and the feeling of enacting and the feeling of making sure that you can get out into the world as a strong, singular, independent human being actually relies very much on what I just said as the kind of like the underpinning of who you are. And I truly believe that that's almost like it's almost like the lubricant that can actually get you out into the world and become the best person that you can possibly be. I want to end by saying that Neptune in the first house people are actually very, very beautiful. They have parts that are connected to life where the volume is turned up a little tiny bit more on feeling, a little tiny bit more on compassion, and a little tiny bit more on true, honest, soulful love. And if they can do this, particularly for themselves to start off with, and then be able to get out into the world and to be able to share that with others, then having Neptune in the first house for these people is going to make their lives into something really, really special.